The Renaissance began with the migration of Greek scholars to Italy following the fall of Constantinople in the 14th century. Aristotle's arguments concerning structural elements in drama and painting provided a springboard for the Renaissance discussion of the concept ut pictura poesis. The Greek poet Horace wrote the famous line ut pictura poesis, but before Horace there was the lyric poet Simonides of Chios who wrote, "Poetry is vocal painting as painting is silent poetry." This analogy clearly influenced the Florentine painters of the early Renaissance, Michelangelo, Raphael, Botticelli, and others. They were narrative painters, storytellers, expecting their paintings to be read. This is Raphael's School of Athens. We see the figures of Plato and Aristotle in the center, Plato pointing skyward, Aristotle pointing earthward. Plato's side, overseen by a statue of Apollo, represents artists, writers, intellectuals. On the other side are the Aristotelians, overseen by a statue of the earthy, more pragmatic Minerva. Plato and Aristotle are emblematic representatives of two complementary principles of thought. And note that the painting is triadic in design, with two side panels balancing a central focal point. This is Raphael's Disputa. Again, a story is being told, and again we find the same triadic three-panel structure. And this is Botticelli's The Story of Virginia. What better example of Simonides' words, "Poetry is vocal painting," can be imagined than these lines from the play Antony and Cleopatra? Here Caesar is describing an angry mob who he believes lack the intellect to reason logically, and so are easily influenced by others, first taking one position, then another. This common body, like to a vagabond flag upon the stream, goes to and back, lacking the varying tide to rot itself with motion. What the playwright formed was a speaking picture. As we listen, we see in our mind's eye an image the words create. Let us examine how, during the Renaissance, poetic form was conceived in spatial terms, and we will see how Renaissance thought was spatially oriented. When Edmund Spenser begins the last canto of the Faerie Queene with the words, "Now begins this goodly frame of temperance fairly to rise," he is saying that in addition to the narrative structure, a unified structure of meaning has been erected, a spatial structure like a building, which, now that the book is concluding, can be seen as a whole. Spenser outlined his projected structure for the Faerie Queene in a letter to Sir Walter Raleigh. He wrote that it would be like an elaborately organized cycle of paintings, comparable in structure to Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel paintings, with the 12 projected books devoted to the 12 private virtues, ultimately to be balanced by a second series of books devoted to the public virtues. Symmetrical triadic design can be observed in Christopher Muller's poem, Hero and Leander. The opening section of the poem is the description of Hero and Leander's first encounter. This is followed by a section that weaves a mythological tale of Mercury, the country maid, and the fates. In the third section, balancing the opening section in length, Marlowe writes of the consummation of Hero and Leander's love. The centerpiece, the mythological tale, is not the digression it might appear to be, but a demonstration of the power of love at work in the universe. It is this geometric center that provides the key to both structure and meaning. The play A Midsummer Night's Dream presents a particularly clear example of symmetrical triadic design. The play begins in the daylight world of Athens, city of reason. The middle section of the play is set in a fanciful moonlit world ruled by fairies and ends with the sun rising. The third section takes us back to Athens. It is daylight, and reason again prevails. As in Hero and Leander, the first and third sections are side panels, roughly equivalent in length, running in this case 250 and 350 lines respectively. The second section, or central panel, runs 1,300 lines. The design of A Midsummer Night's Dream suggests a playwright with a strong sense of spatial form and remarkable powers of organization. Some of the plays in the canon, however, exhibit a symmetrical dyadic structure. A Winter's Tale illustrates this structure clearly. The key to the design is the character Time, who enters in the middle, dividing the play into two parts, which are roughly equal in length, the first running 1,370 lines, and the second 1,550 lines. The character Time carries an hourglass, which exactly in the middle of his speech he turns upside down. The two halves of A Winter's Tale correspond to each other in an elaborate system of parallels and contrasts. The first, or winter panel, is a tragedy in miniature. The section concludes with a symbolic recapitulation of the destructive forces in the foreground of this panel. This first panel is about death, but the comic shepherds who enter midway through the scene foreshadow the second section, the spring panel, which is about rebirth. This structural scheme is present in most of the major scenes in the canon as well. Let's consider the Battle of Towton sequence in Henry VI, Part 3. With the war between the Lancastrians and the Yorkists raging around him, the king has stopped to meditate upon the battle. The scene begins with the king remarking how, like the sea, the battle sways first in one direction, then another. Then he overhears two soldiers commiserating. One is a father who has inadvertently killed his own son in battle. The other is a son who has inadvertently killed his father. Then the king dreams of the shepherd's peaceful life. He pictures himself carving a sundial and using it to regulate every aspect of his life. So many hours must I tend my flock, so many hours must I take my rest, so many hours must I contemplate, so many hours must I sport myself, so many days my ewes have been with young, so many months ere I shall shear the fleece, so many minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years, passed over to the end they were created, would bring white hairs unto a quiet grave. Ah, what a life were this, how sweet, how lovely! The regulated steadiness of the life Henry envisions contrasts with the swaying of the tides of battle, fortune sweeping in one direction and then another. The shepherd's life has meaning, the soldier's does not. This central scene, set between paired battle segments, provides a key to the play's central idea. This is not an isolated instance of Shakespearean scene design. Most of the major scenes in the plays are geometrically structured and have a central dramatic arc. In Greek drama, the entire plot of a play would be comprehended in a single action. In Shakespearean drama, a number of single actions are interwoven into a plot, and such plots are sometimes further compounded into a more complex plot, the various elements of a plot scheme exhibiting mutual parallelism, harmony, or contrast.